Thank you very much, Dr. Singh. Thank you so much. We had some technical problems. We've got a pointer. We've got all kinds of stuff here. When they asked me to speak at this symposium, I said, what are you asking me for? I'm a doctor. I'm not really much of a scientist. And they said, no, it'll be okay. You can do that. So I'm here, and I'm very flattered to be here. It's interesting about, we heard from Dr. Heinrich about fecal transplants. At least there's no donor shortage, right? It's, but anyway, when I get here, I see a scientist in the audience who I have to introduce because every microbiologist in the world knows about him. And as a scientist, I'm not exaggerating when I say I'm not fit to shine his shoes. And that's Dr. Robert Murray, Jr. And we're just, he's just a giant in microbiology. And I'm just so pleased that he's able to join us tonight. I'm not trying to embarrass you, Bob, but you deserve that recognition. And I would find that very intimidating if he wasn't such a good friend of mine. And I'm so proud to be able to say that. So anyway, I see some of my students here, some very good friends, and I'm just delighted. Any of my students will tell you if there's one thing that ticks me off, it's people that go around saying that vaccinations are not a good thing. So why you should stop worrying and love the shot. The three biggest things that have benefited humankind in all of history, the cooking of food was a very big one, to keep some bad microbes out of our gut microflora and let the good ones proliferate. Separating us from our toxic waste by the construction of sanitary sewers, a huge advance. And they did this in some of the ancient cities of Rome and Greece. And there are still places in the world where this hasn't been done. And the third one is immunization. They're not in any particular order, but I'll tell you, immunization has saved more people than any drug, any operation, any intervention, with the possible exception of the other two on that list. So now you know where I stand. The history of this starts 1,000 years ago in a process called variolation, where people were given the disease in a controlled manner in the hope that this would be less deadly than getting the disease. They blew dried smallpox scabs up the nose, and they did find that 1% to 2% of people died doing that, compared to 1/3 of people that died catching it in the normal way. In 1714, in Constantinople, Lady Mary Wortley Montagu, the wife of the British ambassador to Turkey, which wasn't called Turkey in those days, and a Dr. Timony observed this process and brought it into the modern era. In 1721, a guy by the name of Zabdiel Boylston and another one, Cotton Mather, learned this separately by watching a Senegalese slave named Onesimus variolate someone, and they thought this was very interesting. And at the same time, Sir Hans Sloane, you've heard of those preppies in London, England, the Sloane Rangers? Well, that was named after Sloane Street, who was named after Sir Hans Sloane. He was the king's physician, and he observed the daughter of Lady Montagu being variolated, who had brought this news of this practice back from the Middle East. And this spread among the royal families of Europe. You probably have heard of this. In 1796, vaccination with cowpox by Edward Jenner after observing hot milkmaids. Now, why would I say hot milkmaids? because everybody had pockmarked skin like the dark side of the moon. Milkmaids were women of lower socioeconomic classes that were employed in large numbers to milk cattle and goats. And they naturally acquired cowpox, vaccinia virus, which cross-immunized them against smallpox, and they had the same kind of beautiful, clear skin that you all have. But they were the only ones that had it. And this created a lot of speculation as to why they had such great skin when nobody else did. And it also created the idea that somehow milk and milk products applied topically are good for your skin. So you still see soaps and creams and shampoos and everything else being advertised that milk is an ingredient, and it's because of this association with milkmaids having clear skin. There's no evidence that putting any milk product on your skin does anything, but at least it doesn't hurt you. And this vaccination with cowpox was so much safer than even the variolation that this very quickly caught on. But even then, they had anti-vaccine activists. They had political cartoons with little cattle growing out of people's arms and all kinds of stuff. I had a picture of that, but it was too blurry to show you. So the modern era started with the great Louis Pasteur, who was a wine chemist trying to learn the diseases of wine, and promulgated one of the Western iterations of the germ theory of disease. He made the first man-made vaccine, which was attenuated rabies virus, and saved the first boy who was exposed to a rabid wolf in France. And in 1896 was the first inactivated vaccine, which was typhoid fever. So there's a lot of myths about vaccinations. So I thought I'd do a David Letterman top 10. So myth number 10, vaccines don't really work. Actually, real, permanent, large drops in morbidity and mortality occurred after vaccines were introduced, even though their rates were already falling due to public health measures. And that needs to be kept in mind. You can't really discount that, but you often hear, no, it wasn't vaccines, it was because the diseases were falling anyway. Well, when vaccines came in, they went through the floor. Myth number 9. The immune system can be overwhelmed by vaccines, especially if several are given at once. You know what, if we couldn't respond to more than one infectious agent at a time, none of us would have made it this far. They activate different clones of cells. And there's absolutely no evidence that giving several vaccines at once is anything but safe and effective. And when you vaccinate people with several vaccines at once, you get earlier protection with fewer clinic visits. Myth number 8. Breastfed babies don't need vaccines because they get everything they need from mother's milk. I wish it was true. A lot of animals don't do well if they're deprived of mother's milk, and there's no question that breastfeeding is the safest and best way to feed human babies. But transplacental antibody is a lot more important in humans than breast milk antibodies are. But that doesn't protect infants against all the diseases that vaccines can protect them against. And by the age of 5 or 6, any immunity you get from that transplacental antibody is gone. Vaccines last a lot longer. Myth number 7. Oh, but it's just a little baby. We can't be giving them shots. They're too young for that. Wrong again. Almost all cases of whooping cough, pertussis, occur under 1 year of age. Many other diseases too, and some of them are deadly. And vaccines work very well in very young infants, except for polysaccharide vaccines, which are vaccines that are made of antigens with sugar, basically. They don't hurt kids, but they just don't take very well. Number 6, vaccine-preventable diseases are mostly gone anyway. Who gets polio anymore? So what do we need to get vaccinated for? Sure, just like the recent mumps and measles outbreaks that cost Ontario megabucks to contain. And who wants mumps anyway? You know, you get that as an adult. It's like getting kicked in the testicles for 6 weeks if you're a man. And even 6 seconds is too much for me. My favorite, human papillomavirus vaccine is killing teenage girls. I had to deal with this in Chatham. No, it's not. At the time that happened, there were 13 reported vaccine-associated deaths. And that's scary. Vaccine-associated death. Ooh, but what does that really mean? Well, in the United States, they have this system, the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, where anybody can phone in any type of adverse effect. And huge numbers of people try and get information, but if it's not available, they have to try and define from coroner's reports and unreported deaths and all kinds of investigations to find out what really happened. So if somebody just called up and said, "My little brother just died from a vaccine," they would have to follow that up, and that would count as a reported vaccine-associated death. They try and find out what area code it came from and do all the workup. Well, when they did that, of the 13 reported deaths, 9 never happened at all. There were no deaths in 9. 3 of them were due to car accidents, which is a bit of a stretch to call that a vaccine-associated death. It may have been associated in time, but it wasn't associated in causality. And 1 was due to bacterial meningitis, and that wasn't the vaccine that the person had, and that's, I would call that, as a medical officer of health, unrelated as well. So mainly these spooky deaths are problems with the unverifiable nature of the US vaccine reporting system rather than any real side effects.